Thank you so much for being here. My name is Matthew Rascoff. I'm Vice Provost for Digital Education, and I'm so honored to have this fantastic panel focused on student success and AI. And we are right on time today. Thank you for your patience. We're going to get started, and by way of introduction, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to share one surprising data point that they have access to. Maybe it's some proprietary data from their own organizations, their own technologies, something that stands out for them, maybe a contrarian insight from the past couple of days about AI and student success, to which the audience probably does not have access. And maybe can you get us started, Jenny?
Yeah, since you asked. Hi, everybody. I'm Jenny Maxwell. I'm the head of Grammarly for Education. One surprising thing, I would say just the uptake of our generative AI features amongst staff and faculty in the last several months as compared to the previous 6 months when we launched our functionality. It's been quite surprising and exciting.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Chasen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Class Technologies. I've been in the edtech space for a while. Before this, I was the co-founder and CEO of a large e-learning software company, Blackboard. I would say that the most surprising thing really to me has been discovering how much we need to think about new workflows with regards to AI. And let me explain for a second. So we've been really alpha testing and beta testing our new AI teaching assistant, so that in online classes, a teacher and students will now have access to a virtual TA that can help them out during class time. So if the student doesn't want to raise their hand and maybe interrupt what's the equivalent of an online Zoom meeting to ask the teacher a question, they can ask the TA. What we didn't think about, though, was if you have the AI TA running during the whole class, when the teacher, let's say, gives the students a quiz or hands out an assignment, that the students might figure out, I can probably just ask the AI TA the answers to that. So it's actually just, you have to go one step further and think about all of these new workflows that need to be incorporated when you're thinking about utilizing AI in your product and implementing these new AI processes.
Thank you so much. Shiren?
Yeah, so Shiren Vijiasingam, Chief Product Officer at Instructure, make of the LMS of Canvas. When we started down the AI journey, we wanted to understand where sort of the mindset of educators were. And so we ran a survey last summer and looking at the adoption of AI, and it was something like 25% of educators were even thinking about adopting AI. We just reran it after the start of the spring, right? So the end of Q1, and that number jumped to 49%, right? So we saw this 23-point jump, which is, in my history, I've been doing education for a while, I've never seen such a dramatic shift in behavior in a 9-month period with faculty who, just not always known for adopting new things quickly. So I think it's telling the interest and the shift in the behavior driven by, the number one factor is, hey, this makes me more efficient, and nobody wants to spend their Saturday nights doing anything other than the things they want to be doing. And so it's exciting to see the shift happen so dramatically, and I think it's going to shape a lot of what we all do.
Thank you. And Tim?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tim Renick. I'm the Executive Director of the National Institute for Student Success, and for 13 years I headed up student success programs at Georgia State University. We're working with about 70 campuses right now. They go through a diagnostic as they begin their engagement with my institute, and part of that is a set of surveys and interviews, and we've surveyed and interviewed over 2,000 student success professionals over the last 2.5 years. And so my data point is 0. It builds upon Sharon's point. Some of the questions ask about AI and what your campus is doing with regard to AI and supporting students' ability to handle administrative tasks, but increasingly in the classroom as well. And the 0 is, over the past 2.5 years, we haven't had any real substantive response against the integration of AI in those contexts. The staff has been craving the know-how about how to do so, maybe the resources to implement it, but there has been really no pushback about that's the direction student support services are heading in.
Thank you. Those were great. And I'll offer one, which was a randomized controlled trial that was done at Stanford inside a big online course with early access to GPT-4 that showed reduced engagement in the course for learners, but better performance on a final exam. And there were lots of differential effects also based on age of the learners, based on what countries they were coming from. So not at all clear that this was going to be beneficial in the context of learning. Early stage experiment, and there's going to be another set of randomized controlled trials that we run in the next version of this course with 12,000 learners around the world. It's called Code in Place, if you want to look it up at Stanford. And it's simultaneously an online outreach project and a research project that gathers data behind the scenes. So I want to talk a little bit about building in this space. And because there's so many builders here, so many entrepreneurs, so many founders and investors, raise your hand if you've heard the term human in the loop in the past couple of days. Human in the loop. It's become almost a meme. But to me, Tim, you've pioneered this unique model of co-creating technology when you were at Georgia State with vendors who had the power to build alongside you, and you were able to expose the challenges that you saw leading the nation's premier student success organization and bring in these technologists who could learn from you, build for you, and then build products that would benefit everybody else to scale up what you were doing. So can you just speak to me, how can we learn the lesson of that collaboration now that we have this new generation of AI technologies with all these entrepreneurs who, to me, need access to our use cases inside institutions, and we need them. We need to build software that helps us scale up. And to me, you figured out how to do that, working with human advisors and tech, working with vendors, but not really as vendors, more as partners. But to walk us through that model.
It was largely done by desperation. So it's not some great design. It's the fact that I still am at Georgia State. We're a very large 50,000 student institution with low tuition and lots of underserved students. 80% of our students are non-white, 60% are Pell eligible, and so forth. So we needed to strike these partnerships. We certainly didn't have the resources to build, technologies that could support and track students at that scale and so forth. So just so people know, we were one of the first 3 schools to launch with EAB. We were the very first school to launch with Mainstay. We were the very first school to launch with Stepping Blocks, if you know those names. And what we did in each case was out of our self-interest, but theirs as well, which is really lean into the data, recognize that for me to be able to convince my stakeholders, largely skeptical faculty and staff and so forth, that these systems were worth scaling across the university, we had to have really good research studies. So every one of those instances, we started with randomized controlled trials, or in some cases longitudinal studies and so forth, conducted by independent researchers. And we used that research then to refine the product, refine what we were doing. In the case of EAB, about 2 years in, we went back to them and said, look, it's great to track academic analytics and risk factors, but many of our students are dropping out for financial reasons. So why can't we layer into the same platform you've already developed and some of the same analytics we were already using to inform that platform, financial alerts that indicate when a student is at risk of losing their aid or their scholarship and so forth. With Mainstay, we started, initially it was a tool to help with summer melt. Help for just a few months of the student life cycle. And it worked so well for us, we said, this makes no sense to turn this system off. Let's figure out a way where the students, after they matriculate, can still benefit from the platform. And more recently, we've begun integrating it into the classroom. And the last point I'll make is, Matthew's talking about RCTs run at Stanford. RCTs run at Georgia State at both our 2-year community college campuses and for our bachelor's programs, so very, very different type of student. We've been able to show the chatbot impact in the classroom to via randomized control trials, independent evaluators to have about a 7-point bump in final grades in those courses. So, there's something going on here that's not just for one special target audience.
And and we have 3 tech companies represented here. Do you have any models for how can institutions work with you better? Are there any case studies from your past clients co-creating? What do you wish folks like Tim and I would do differently as we try to build technology that serves more needs more effectively? Any of you?
We have a unique perspective at Grammarly where we've been a pretty successful B2C company. We had our 15th birthday last week, and we have optics and data around all of the students that work with us at an enterprise level. but without the actual enterprise data and insights that their universities could really benefit from to inform policy. So our perspective is we'd love to meet and share what we know about how students, faculty, and staff are engaging with us as direct consumers and provide sort of the through line to make meaningful impact with larger scale university-informed rollouts.
Michael, do you want to jump in there?
Look, I think one of the great things about working in the higher education market space, we sell both to higher ed and to do some corporate training and K-12 as well. But one of the great things about higher education is I feel like every client that uses our technology is actually a partner of ours. I actually think it's great the amount of feedback that we get from every single client. Maybe not as organized as we would otherwise like, but it is almost overwhelming amount of feedback, which helps us make the product a lot better. So, and I really do think that that's unique a little bit to this industry, which is just a very open industry. Our corporate clients don't call us up with a small feature idea or a small improvement, but we constantly hear from our clients in education about ways to make the product better, make it work better for them, make it work better for the industry. So I think that the collaboration that's natural in this industry is that automatic feedback cycle that we have in place, and we take advantage of that.
And is there a mechanism to share your data back with the research community? So you're learning more about active learning on class than pretty much any other platform out there. Wouldn't that be a very powerful source of research?
Yeah, and look, and again, I think that the benefit of these types of conferences or the white papers we put out or the research studies we do in conjunction with our clients is the way that we get that information back out. Again, I think this is a very collaborative industry, and we share all the extra information that we get, that we're allowed to share, and vice versa. We work with institutions that want us to do and share their data as much as possible so that our product is better because of that.
Shiren, do you have
Yeah,
an example?
I'll add to that because I do agree. I think the organizations in higher ed and K-12 are really comfortable with sharing that data. I think the one thing that I'd ask of you all, right, is that there's lots of great tools represented by lots of great vendors on stage in the room, and there is a lot of looking at independent tool usage, right, and sort of the effect, and I think there's an opportunity to say, what is the connection between these tools, right? So we sit at the intersection of where the learning is hubbed, and so we've got a network of 1,000 partners. And so what's always been interesting for us is when someone is launching an assignment that goes out to 3 different LTI tools, what is the relationship between those 3 things and the core of student success and the core of the outcomes? Because I think being able to isolate the things that are successful and being able to connect the dots between the data is what's going to help you all make better decisions about what's working. And what's going to work for one set of students may be different than what works for another. And so being able to truly tailor that experience to learners with the connectivity here, I think will create a better outcome.
So Jenny and Shiren, both of you made the case that traditional learning models need to be disrupted. Jenny, you argued that we need new policies and curriculum changes related to AI in higher education. And you emphasized the need for collective action and moving, you called it past analysis paralysis. But Shiren, you also made the case that there are a lot of unknowns in this space and uncertainties in terms of how students and faculty may interact with these tools. So help us understand, do you think we're ready to make policies? To me, many of the school districts that instituted policies regret it greatly because they were hastily written and they were somewhat reflexive. Are we now ready to do policy in your view, Jenny? And hash this out for us. How do you think about the interactions between technology and policy and the maturity of this ecosystem?
Thank you. I think that it's a continuum, right? And policy isn't this one big sweeping decision. I think it's iterative, and it should be highly iterative as the technology continues to evolve. I will say, recently, Grammarly was brought into national media attention around an institution that did not have definitive policy, and that had a really catastrophic impact on one student in particular. And so we think that there's urgency, or at least to minimally align on how much optics there are around, if it's an individual faculty member, then that needs to be stated just the way that, if you go back 20 years ago and there was an annotation around which courses were hybrid or online. If you are using generative AI, you need to let students know. I think the consumer side of student behavior is going to inform a faster adoption of the tools with faculty because they are the biggest buying class in higher ed, right? So, yeah, I think my point is, like, we don't need to boil the ocean on policy right now, but we need to come up with one thing that we think, what's the MVP for this moment for fall, all align on what that is and make sure it is highly communicative out to the audience of students.
So you think it's on the institutions to develop policy, but the technology is changing very rapidly. So
I think that's a great opportunity for both to come together and share at least what, like, we have things that are coming out this summer that I'm not going to share yet, that would likely very much influence policy for schools and institutions this fall. So I think it's, we just...
wait till the fall.
Well, I mean, call me. Yeah, I mean, by fall, if you think about where these LLMs are going to be by fall, it's like decades, in comparison to other technologies. So I think the challenge for institutions is to come up with a policy sort of process that doesn't look like anything else, right? It has to be something that is almost like an incubator sort of space on campus. And look, I think also too, there's campuses that are coming up with really incredible policy that stem from forward-thinking leadership. We see policy coming into place urgently is around doing some trust fall between the administration and faculty and saying, look, this isn't a forever. Let's try this academic year and come back.
Who's doing it well? Name names.
Well, I think Arizona State is doing it quite well.
Somebody other than Arizona State.
Okay. I think the University of Pennsylvania is incredibly flexible in how they're thinking about this. We have some really amazing partners, both in the community college and four-year space that we are collaborating on. I love the way that Western Governors is working with us now. I'm really proud I can share that announcement. They're doing that, with a global deployment of Grammarly starting imminently, and so how they're thinking about it and meeting students where they need to be in order to get them the outcomes that they so deeply desire for professional success is one thing that we're doing. So.
Okay, now Shiren, argue the other side for us, because you were emphasizing the uncertainty in this space. And it makes sense. It's Instructure, it's infrastructure, right?
So my take on it is this, right? To define policy, you have to know what it is. And it is changing. From the start of this conference to now, there's probably a new model that's out there. And so I think to presume you could define something that's concrete and defined, I think is going to presuppose knowing what we don't yet know and what is changing at a rapid pace. I think there are institutions that have taken broader approaches to it. I kind of think of it as principles are really important to think about. Principles like what is happening with your data, what types of models, how do you want to navigate those models? And I think that is what's going to be relevant to a group like this that says, hey, if you're talking to an institution about whatever the AI tool it is you're doing, whether it's the entirety of your tool or a portion of your tool, how are you thinking about the use of student data? How are you communicating that? In ways that an institution that may not 100% know what they are thinking about, but at some point is going to get a question from somewhere in their constituency, their students, the faculty senate, someone who says, what is happening with this? And I think the burden is going to be on some of us to say, here's how we're thinking about it holistically, and here's how we're doing it, without forcing it into the confines of a policy that you then have to upend every 3 months because there's yet another new tool.
I think that's very persuasive. Michael, do you want to
Look, first of all, let me say, it's not just institutions, it's companies as well. I mean, we have to deal with our own policies and internal processes around all these things. And the thing that I'll say is I don't think it's as important to say, oh, we have to have this specific policy, as much it is to have someone who's focused on it. So we actually have someone who full-time, Tess Frazier, who's actually here, focuses on AI compliance and security, and is constantly reviewing what's going on. So it's not about writing a specific policy as much as it is making sure you're active in what's going on to understand how it might affect or change your existing policies.
And do you have a counterpart at institutions? Do you have a counterpart at institutions who's able to understand the issues, engage in that dialogue? Like,
look, we have a number of
responding?
close partners, but let me think the policies are obviously different for institutions that have the faculty and students versus kind of internal in companies. So I was actually more referring to that. I think everyone just needs to have someone who is focused on it because it is so rapidly changing and so overarching influential that it's not something that a single policy is going to be able to handle because of the rapid amount of change that's taking place. You really have to have people that are focused on it.
So, and Tim, how do you think about, you're talking about all this data, you're collecting so much, and you've got all these vendors running around. How are you protecting Georgia State students' privacy when you know, the HECVAT that was developed like 10 years ago, it didn't presume all the possibilities for what we could do with student data, right? Totally out of date.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's totally out of date. I mean, everything that we do gets analyzed by both our tech team and our legal team to make sure that it's compliant with FERPA and other sorts of protections and so forth, and we've never had any violation over, 10 years of using millions of bits of data. So I'm not sure that's changed dramatically. Maybe it will in the coming months. I can tell you that at Georgia State and at the 70 schools we're working with at the Institute, I don't really see a lot of discussion about an institution-wide policy at this point. That's not the nature of the conversation, nor may it need to be. I think that ultimately what will happen for a lot of post-secondary institutions is that legal will get involved and say, you can do this and you can't do this other thing. But I think there's going to be a lot of flexibility given to faculty members to decide how they're going to apply, these new approaches. I know in our English department this spring alone, you've got some introductory classes that are really leaning into ChatGPT, coming up with assignments where the student is asked to write on a topic, knowing that in class they will compare what the student writes to the GPT version of the same course. Faculty members who are having students graded before editing ChatGPT writing on certain topics and so forth. I don't see anytime soon that kind of freedom is going to change, but I do think that our legal office is concerned, for instance, about uses that may have copyright infringements and things along those lines, and that's where the policy is likely to come in.
If I'll add, you asked, you're doing your job right as agent provocateur here, right? But policy is sort of the stick approach to thinking about it, and I think there's a carrot approach to thinking about it, which is education and communication, right? And so, we've got great partners sitting in the room here, San Diego State, that have created this incredible literacy program for all of their faculty, all of their learners, and they're credentialing them against it because I think some of it is just the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, doubt. I don't know what this is, so I don't want to do it. But can you educate them, right? One of the things we've talked about is creating this idea of nutrition facts, right? So if you're creating something, tell us what model you're using, where does it live, how does it go, where's the data? And I think those are the kinds of things that set us up to be able to have a forward-looking conversation about the benefits that I think are going to be tremendous without getting hung up in the, here's how not to use it policy.
So it's like a transparency. In the absence of policy, let's at least have transparency.
That's right, transparency and
about
principles
the value
and
of the
outcome.
Component. Yeah. Okay. So for the last part of our discussion, I want to talk about the frontiers. Like, where do you see things heading? And I realize that's very difficult. The technology is changing very rapidly. But you each have access to a roadmap for your own organizations. Some of that may be proprietary, obviously. But to the extent that you're able to share it, Jenny, you mentioned some new technologies that you're building this summer that might shape what happens in the fall. Like, what do you see? And it doesn't have to be things that you're developing yourselves. Maybe it's something that you've seen over the past couple of days that you admire. But just give us a sense of the unknowns that you're excited about. What are we headed into? And what do you think is also worth working on? Like, to me, I'll get us started. Chat is completely played out, and I'm totally bored with chatbots, and I don't need to see any more of them. But this morning, I saw a student project that has figured out how to use computer vision on handwritten math. And so you can handwrite math equations, and you can write math assessments with open-ended questions as a result. And it accurately digitizes the responses and can give feedback to students on the way, including half-correct responses, which is very difficult. Multiple choice tests don't capture that. That is an exciting application of AI that could have transformative possibilities for formative assessment in math, which doesn't have that now. So I would say the frontier is embedding AI into the interfaces that are already familiar to us, where we know there's potential in higher quality assessments, but they haven't been scalable. And the reason we have multiple choice is not because anybody believes in them as an assessment, but just because they're very efficient and very cheap to do. So that to me is a frontier, taking what we know works and and scaling it up with technologies other than chat.
Well, I'm a parent of grade school children, and so I come at this from the lens of a parent, and I'm really excited about that being something that my kids will have access to. From Grammarly's perspective, I'm really tired of talking about plagiarism and AI detection. I really want us to move past this, and I want to talk about how Grammarly and the collective leadership in higher ed can help students become content managers and be able to definitively show where the human and these LLMs engage. Spoiler alert. So yeah, we're excited about what's to come, particularly embedded in this higher education enterprise ecosystem with the Grammarly that you loved and trusted, and how we can continue to give students, think about Marley, think about the student, and if she had some course of action to take where she wasn't definitively accused of something that when we looked into her process, she did not plagiarize. We want to be able to give that freedom for students to use these tools responsibly and ethically and be able to apply the training that they get in 4 years or 2 years of their programs to be great content managers. They're going to have to do this at work. And we know this because we work with a third of the Fortune 500, and they tell us every day that this is the most important skill they're going to be hiring for in the next several years.
Writing?
Communication and writing, yes, and the written word is the means by which we are going to be communicating. 88% of time is spent right now on the written communication at work.
So there's going to be a revival of writing when we're all able to get unstuck.
Yeah, right. Well, we're really stuck now because it's a really muddy sort of ecosystem of tools. But we just there's going to be a rise of, I think, tools that provide the efficiency and also the ability for us to think about our thinking and thinking about how we engage with all of these bots and being able to accept the recommendations because they help us achieve the goal of the content, and give people confidence to say, no, this isn't the goal. I politely decline this. This is not my tone. This is not the objective. So we're working on creating a clear path to helping both institutions and students walk away from the police state of binary writing as assessment.
Okay, in any order. We don't have to go down the line. Who wants to jump in next? You'll all have a chance to, and you can respond to Jenny also if you want to.
Well, I'll say my cutting edge is apparently to bore you because. And again, you're being a provocateur here, but I think we can't underestimate how far we need to go to get even rudimentary types of AI into the hands of the vast majority of students. We're working with community colleges and HBCUs and MSIs and so forth. And the reality is even simple chatbots applied well can have transformative effects. We've released about 5 RCTs run by independent evaluators over the last 5 or 6 years. And from FAFSA completion rates going up, to students resolving holds on their accounts, to students getting better help in academic courses and so forth. What we've seen again and again in every study we've run is usage of the chatbots is heavier at 12 midnight than 9 in the morning, which says we're tapping into a group of students who weren't getting help before. They're disproportionately working students. They're disproportionately, parents and have child and other parenting and other responsibilities and so forth. So we've got such a long way to go with getting even basic responses to simple questions into the hands of students, that especially in a group that includes so many people who are working on the technology side of things, we can't lose sight of putting affordable resources into the hands of campuses where these students, if we don't do it, are just not going to get the help and not get the answers at all.
And I don't think that's boring. I just don't think that's the frontier, because you can do that with today's technology. And I think what you're talking about is scaling up effectively the technologies that we already have, that we know work. This is, if you've got randomized.
It's my frontier, though, and it's the frontier for 90% of the schools that we're working with, and that's why I just wanted to make the point that I'm, visiting these community colleges, and when you go to Henry Ford Community College up in the Detroit area, this is a radical frontier for them. So we can't lose sight of the fact that, what's very commonplace at Stanford may be completely foreign to places like Henry Ford Community College.
I think I just got the Arizona State treatment here. Shiren, go jump in.
I wanted to just build, because I think for as long as we've been talking about education, we've been talking about variable learning and individualized learning and all of that. And it's like, it sounds good in these conference tracks, but it never actually pans out because it's not practical, it's not realistic. And so I think the most powerful thing that I think we will see. We will get through the hype cycle, and we'll come out on the other side of the chatbots and all the other solutions, because we've got to try them all, right? But the real value on the other side of that is for that struggling neurodivergent learner, for that language learner, for that person who says, this just isn't for me, when really it was about the modality and the format of the learning. That is the real value. That is the real opportunity. I think we will be able to scale the idea of personalizing these things in ways that meet the needs of that learner in the way they want to consume, at the time they want to consume, in the format they want to consume, with the right levels of supports, right? The blank page problem when you're trying to write is a really difficult one. And how do you start that without overwhelming with too much of the answer, but at the same time providing just enough support and keeping them inside of that zone of proximal development, not too far inside or outside of it. And I think that's the real value. So that's what I'd be looking forward to as I were to think about the future, is if we could all make things like that, how much more amazing would it be?
And what do you see as Instructure's role? You mentioned integration is really the key challenge. It doesn't sound like you're going to be building your own chatbot anytime soon if you're the integrator.
I think we want to build the things that only we can uniquely do, where critical knowledge of, for example, the data that powers learning inside of the Instructure infrastructure is critical to be able to tell a story about the data. However, we have a network of 1,000 partners. We want to make it trivially easy. So we've actually built out a framework that allows, if you're building something that plugs into the learning experience inside of our rich content editor, build a tool that will just seamlessly work in there, so you don't have to think about the hard parts of connecting the dots. I think LTI gets us some of the way there, but we've got to push the boundaries past that. And so, yeah, I think making it really easy for folks who are going to build amazing solutions to just work seamlessly, so that we take all the friction out of the thinking about, do I use this tool or not, or do I use this format or not, right? So, yeah.
Michael.
So I'll share something very specific. We haven't talked about this, so just everybody here, don't share it with anybody else. So our internal AI innovation group at class is, as I talked about, kind of open, talking about our AI teaching assistant, which is it's really a chatbot that goes in your class Zoom or Microsoft Teams meeting. And we're already looking at kind of the next generation. So we've taken avatar technology, and we've actually now had the AI log into the Zoom meeting or the Microsoft Team meeting as a person in the meeting that can then listen and actually interact. Right now, we started as a teaching assistant, but you could also make the person an accountant or a marketing specialist, or even a legal expert, or a QA technician or an IT support person, and they actually join the meeting. And we're doing some interesting work to make sure that right now the AI chatbots are more of like a one-to-one conversation. So this one, since it's in a Zoom meeting, has to listen to everybody, figure out when to chime in, and then even have the ability to read the screen share, or even do a screen share themselves of content that they're creating. So I think that's, you just talked about how you're a little bit tired of chatbots. I'm not sure that this is, it's really kind of one more step forward with it. But it's something really interesting, because if you can have that type of expertise now available to group work, to a class, to a group of students that are studying, that may need help with a particular problem, but they can get it in a way where they're working as a team and discussing it, or and have someone there to maybe run the study group as a virtual resource. I think that's some interesting implications and implementations of the technology, and that's just some of the stuff we're working on internally. So people want to talk about that afterwards. We'd love to certainly connect, but I think that's that next evolution of a AI chatbot, and something I think can be pretty powerful in the classroom.
To me, that's integrated into the flow of work that exists already, and I think that's different. It's not asking me to do a different interaction. I'm doing meetings anyway, and I'm inviting this additional expert to come to my meeting and interact with us and give us feedback, and we can query it. Like that does feel substantively different. So even if the technology is different.
Oh, I thought it was a contest. Sorry. Okay.
I don't know. To me, I think the presentation of these technologies and the user interface is going to be a big factor in the adoption of it. And if we can get into the flow of work for teachers, then it won't feel like additional labor for them. It'll feel like something that they were doing anyway, and they were doing it better. But if you're asking them to just engage in an entirely different kind of interaction or support their students doing it, I think we will see more resistance. So that I don't know. I don't know if that's right. Does anybody want to jump in on Michael's idea? I mean, what do you think? Would you implement that in your meetings, Tim?
Yeah, well, I can say this summer we are for a group of summer bridge students who come in with some academic disadvantages compared to the rest of the incoming class. we are going to be using AI to look at the conversations they're having and to give feedback to the instructors about what the mood of the room is, make some consensus conclusions about what people are feeling, what they're saying, and so forth. So it's a parallel application to what we're talking about here.
There's a set of technologies that were built through a lab at Stanford that use the analysis of the transcript of a discussion to give feedback to the instructor. One of them was commercialized as TeachFX. There's an open source version called Empowered, built by Professor Dora Dembski. Like, that to me is, it connects with what you're saying, Michael. It's using the content of a discussion to give feedback on, like, what was the quality of the discourse? How much uptake of student ideas was there? Were you using active learning principles systematically? Everybody could benefit from an instructional coach, no matter how good a teacher you are, but they're underprovided. And it's a little bit like my math assessment example. We know coaching is effective to help people get better, but we don't have nearly enough of it. So that's a use case that I'm excited about. And if Class for Zoom had that, I think that would be very compelling.
We do. There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's just close maybe by let's just pay tribute to some idea that you've heard from somebody else at this meeting, not your own company. Maybe it's a startup that you've admired, that you learned about at the air show, or just some idea from somebody else. If you can attribute it to another person, I think that would be pretty cool. We've got a few minutes left, but to me, like, part of what's so amazing about ASU+GSV is, like, it brings together from people from so many different backgrounds. We're crossing boundaries of technologists and the educators here, of regional public institutions and private research universities. Bring us an idea that you may have heard from somebody else just in the past couple of days that's inspired you, that maybe would push the thinking of those in this room.
I can start with one. Yeah. So I don't know how many of you walked by on the outside of the Hyatt. There's this giant green RV, belongs to Road Trip Nation. And if you don't know the Road Trip Nation mission, it's a phenomenal one. It's about connecting high school students to opportunity, whatever that path is. And so they had a really interesting approach to how they're thinking about AI, because this is all about video and seeing yourself in others. And so as we think about the journey, we treat the learner in K-12 and the learner in higher ed as distinct populations. It's the same learner, right? They just graduated and they moved on. And so their approach to how they're thinking about it is, how do you connect these millions of stories and learners to the path that is going to resonate with someone, so that their success story is, if you can find someone who looks like and feels like you, then you can connect and you'll see yourself on that journey. And so it's been fascinating to think about their approach to trying to connect someone who might not complete, right, who might drop out in 10th grade, and connecting them to an opportunity pathway. And I think that's a fascinating use, because for me, the technology is a technology, right? Like, we're all talking about the tech, but it's how do you apply it into solving these use cases that are meaningfully challenging in education? And I just found that really fascinating, because it was a welcome, not to harp on the chatbot thing, but it was a welcome breath of fresh air to think about a very, very different way to think about engagement, not at the micro classroom engagement level, but to think about the macro learner journey engagement, right? How do you get more and more people connected to opportunity? How do we help them on these lifelong journeys of learning? So yeah, it was fascinating for me.
Go ahead, Michael.
All right, so I don't know if this will count, but I was talking to my daughter yesterday on the phone. She's a sophomore at Tulane, and she was asking me, pretending to be interested in what I do, why was I in San Diego? And I explained, I'm at this ed tech conference, and she asked a little bit more about it. And I said, it's very heavy focus on AI and how it's disruptive and new and how it's going to influence education. And the interesting thing she said was that she didn't think it was new and disruptive because it's already everywhere in everything that she's doing. She says when she uses Chegg, that's already online. Her textbooks that she's using already have AI pieces. All of her teachers are talking about it. So the interesting thing was just not only how we're all talking about it, like, look, it's going to be disruptive. And she was already like, it's already like everywhere. It's not disruptive. And the thing that it reminded me of was just after the pandemic, I was explaining to my kids that when I was younger, I could only order food delivery from either pizza places or Chinese restaurants. And those were the only two places that would deliver. And my kids were like, why those two very separate and random genres of food that would deliver, because of course they just now think that you can get any food from any restaurant anytime they want it, and it's kind of embarrassing because I actually sometimes our family orders Benihanas like to be delivered. You know, the hibachi grill. It's on DoorDash. So, and I had to explain to my kids how when I was younger it was only those two restaurants, but to them it's just common that you could get any food at any time. And it reminded me of the conversation that I had just had yesterday, because she's like, no, AI is already everywhere. And so it's just interesting to then be here talking about we're talking about how it's all disruptive, and to the students in college, I think it's already commonplace.
Okay. Jenny, do you want to share one?
I mean, I guess my perception is that the way through all of this, in a way that we all feel we're creating actually meaningful change in education, is that the people who've been making the decisions thus far can't be the same ones in the room. I'm excited about an opportunity for institutions and companies to come together and invite people who normally wouldn't be able to be part of the conversation because they maybe don't have the tenure, or knowing what I know about Gen Z and their aptitude being digital natives, they should be very much in the rooms at companies and institutions talking about the tools that are going to impact their next 30, 40 years. We're shackling them with the biggest problems of humanity to solve, and all of this technology, if it doesn't actually help them do that, then what are we all doing? So I'm really inspired by the conversations. I invite more women voices onto stages like this, and yeah, just excited to be here.
Thank you. And Tim, close us out.
Yeah, just coming attraction. So we've received one of the post-secondary student success grants from the Department of Education in December. So we're going to be working over the next 4 years with Morgan State, UCF, and Georgia State on piloting AI coaching in introductory math and English classes. We've got over 40 individual sections designated for RCTs, so stay tuned for that data.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. Great panel.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.